Howdy viewers, my name is Henry, and this is Wild West Film School. In today's episode, we're covering A Fistful of Dollars. First premiering in Italy in 1964, this was the debut western of legendary director Sergio Leone, with the box office success of A Fistful of Dollars and Leone's Greater Dollars trilogy propelling the niche spaghetti western subgenre into the staple of film history we know today. Clint Eastwood stars as a nameless drifter who happens upon the Mexican border town of San Miguel. The town is lawless and desolate, with its few remaining townsfolk at the mercy of two rival factions vying for power. On one end are the Rojos, three brothers who control San Miguel's liquor trade, and then there's the Baxters, the gun-running family of crooked Sheriff John Baxter. The drifter sees this conflict as a chance to profit off of both sides, aiming to play the families against each other. A Fistful of Dollars is famously a reimagining of Akira Kurosawa's 1961 film Yojimbo, trading feudal Japan for the Wild West and a katana-wielding samurai for a gunslinging outlaw. Leone initially wanted to cast James Coburn or Charles Bronson in the lead role, with Coburn proving to be too expensive and Bronson turning down the film after saying the script was the worst he'd ever read. Leone then offered the part to Rawhide star Eric Fleming, who also turned it down but suggested his co-star Clint Eastwood. Eastwood's agent discouraged him from taking the part, calling it a bad move. After dismissing the offer at first, Eastwood reconsidered, deciding that the worst that come from the experience is a paid trip to Italy and Spain, as he'd never been. A Fistful of Dollars would of course go on to be his breakout role, igniting a legendary film career spanning 6 decades and counting. Funnily enough, when Eastwood would form his own production company, he called it Malpasso Productions, Malpasso being Italian for bad move. Charles Bronson and James Coburn would both eventually work with Leone, but it's impossible to imagine anyone other than Clint Eastwood as the man with no name. Apart from the fact that you could not come up with a more Western-sounding name than Clint Eastwood if you tried, he really is the perfect leading man for a Western. He's devilishly handsome, but with such a steely, rugged grit that feels right at home in the Old West. And whereas John Wayne's leading man persona is built on this stern and stoic machismo, Eastwood is far more slick and cheeky. He's still a cold badass, but he's always toying with people. Credited as Joe in A Fistful of Dollars, Eastwood would go by a different name in each film of the Dollars trilogy, the only through line being his signature outfit. I love how much the wardrobe of this film distinguishes itself from Hollywood westerns. The gunslingers of American films dressed simple and clean-cut, whereas here the outfits are intricate and flashy. That sense of style extends beyond just the costuming and into the filmmaking itself. Let's talk about Sergio Leone's direction. Building off the filmmaking language of Kurosawa, who himself built off the language of John Ford, Leone employed a directorial style so fresh, so engaging, and so instantly iconic that he defined the iconography and cultural perception of the Western to this day. If a film or TV show is ever paying homage to or parodying Westerns, more often than not, they're referencing Leone. His precise framing, the intricate blocking, the extreme close-ups of squinting eyes as hands steadily creep to their holsters. Even thematically, Leone's morally gray outlaws and bounty hunters are far more resonant today than black and white cowboys and Indians. The popularity of Leone's take even echoed back in the States. Gone were the days of Stagecoach or The Magnificent Seven. Hollywood was now pumping out films like The Wild Bunch or Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. In the latter half of the swingin' 60s, American audiences became far more interested in films critical of violence and heroism in the Wild West, likely as a reflection of the sentiment people felt towards the country as a whole, but mainly because Leone made the traditional Hollywood Western feel antiquated. A Fistful of Dollars didn't just shape the genre visually and thematically, but also sonically. Any discussion of Leone's influence would not be complete without acknowledging his partner in crime, Ennio Morricone. While the music of Hollywood westerns featured a very traditional orchestral sound, Morricone's sound was far more idiosyncratic and experimental, employing whistles, gunshots, whip cracks, and most notably the electric guitar. Morricone crafted a new sound for the Wild West he dubbed the rock and roll western. When you pair Leone's dynamic widescreen framing with Morricone's thrilling musical score, this small-scale, low-budget B-movie feels like a sweeping blockbuster spectacle. Leone and Morricone's collaborations would only get bigger and better, providing cinema with some of its greatest sights and sounds. What's so crazy is that, like Eastwood, Leone didn't want Morricone initially, instead seeking out Angelo Lavagnino as the film's composer. He relented and met with Morricone anyway, where the two realized they'd grown up and attended primary school together. The two shared their vision of redefining the Western, and the rest is history. Pair that with the Eastwood story and it becomes clear that A Fistful of Dollars really is lightning in a bottle. When watching a film as monumental as this, it's always fun to witness the moment a legend was born. When Eastwood, or Joe, first arrives at San Miguel, he meets a cantina owner named Silvanito. After Silvanito exposits to Joe and the audience about the state of the town and its two factions, Joe recognizes the opportunity to make some money as a hired gun. After asking Silvanito which is the stronger gang, Joe takes out some Baxter thugs to get an in with the Rojos. And it's this very standoff that birthed the spaghetti western style. And hell, with how influential spaghetti westerns have become, define the western as we know it today. First, we have Eastwood's earnest, quick-witted badass.
Get 3 coffins ready. My mistake, 4 coffins.
Next is Morricone's distinct musical flourishes. And finally, Leone's framing. Grimy, sweat-soaked faces overtaking the frame, dynamic character blocking, and most notably, the presentation of violence. It's such an iconic Wild West visual now, but at the time, framing a gun and the person getting shot within the same frame was seen as exceptionally violent. Traditionally, you'd have a shot of the gun going off and then a separate shot of an actor getting hit, providing a sort of disconnect and artifice to the whole thing, which is lost when you see the power of the gun blast in relation to its target. Joe's plan works, and after this sequence, he's introduced to the Rojo brothers. First we have Miguel, the level-headed but indecisive eldest brother and de facto leader of the gang. Then Esteban, the brash and hot-headed youngest, and finally the middle brother Ramon. Ramon is cool, calculated, and dangerous, and the main antagonist of the film. He's portrayed by Gian Maria Volante, who'd also go on to play the antagonist of For a Few Dollars More, but like Eastwood with a different name. Leone does that a lot. So much of this film's cast, even down to the background actors, reappear throughout Leone's entire career. Aside from Eastwood, who's obviously incredible, Volante steals the show as Ramon. Watching his slimy cockiness unravel into pure sadistic desperation over the course of the film is truly a joy to watch. And his final standoff with Joe gives us one of cinema's all-time great oh shit moments, up there with the likes of Willem Dafoe in Spider-Man.
Oh.
With how much fun the Rojos are as villains, the Baxters are sadly left in the dust. They're more of a plot device than actual characters, only there so that the film has two gangs that Joe can play against each other. Speaking of nothing characters that function only to serve the plot, there's a woman named Marisol. She has a husband and a child, but is held captive by Ramon, who's madly in love with her. So, your standard damsel in distress character who does absolutely nothing for me. And holy shit, is her child one of the most annoying characters that I've ever had to endure when watching a film.
You said I'd be able to see her. Where is she? I want to see her.
Come back here, Jesus. Come here.
Where is she? I want to see her. I want to see her. Why can't I look at her? I want to see her.
The ADR is laughably bad. Actually, I should preface the dubbing throughout this film for those unfamiliar. Spaghetti westerns were intended for international audiences and featured predominantly Italian casts and crew. Leone shot his films without sound, and all the actors spoke in their native language. That way, the dialogue could be recorded in post depending on the language of wherever the film was being distributed. Clint Eastwood didn't even record his lines for the film until 3 years after it premiered, when United Artists released an English language version. As a result, spaghetti westerns have a very distinct sound to them, which modern audiences might find a little distracting. The audio is very dry, and sometimes sharp and piercing. I mean, just listen to Esteban's laugh. Okay, maybe that's just the voice actor. I also want to highlight Jose Calvo's performance as Silvanito. He fulfills the role you see in, like, Indiana Jones and James Bond movies where our hero makes a friend or sidekick for the duration of the film, almost like a contact. He provides Joe with information and helps him out. He's a very charming character that plays well off of Eastwood's stoniness. Let's go back to that final standoff I was talking about. With the whole film essentially being a remake of Yojimbo, this climax is the sequence that most wears its influence on its sleeve, being a shot-for-shot recreation at points. Also note how Eastwood isn't wearing a cowboy hat in this scene. His silhouette is defined by the poncho blowing in the wind. He looks like a samurai. And even though we as an audience know he's hiding a sheet of metal functioning as a bulletproof vest, everything about the presentation establishes Eastwood's man with no name as an almost mythical figure. I mean, with the way that the smoke and dust telegraph his entrance, it's like he has control over it. As Ramon keeps shooting at Joe, but he keeps getting back up, it's really gripping stuff. I also adore the first-person cinematography as Ramon stumbles around after being shot. That's a lot of fun. Right from the gate, Leone displayed a profound understanding of eliciting a very engaging and immersive experience with his camera work. That's not to say that A Fistful of Dollars isn't rough around the edges in some parts. Leone's quote-unquote action is defined by the masterful build-up before a single gun even fires, and his most memorable set pieces would be just that. Yet here, there are scenes where it feels like he can't help himself, as gunfire goes on and on with no real momentum behind it. I think the middle chunk of the film as a whole struggles with maintaining the momentum of its first and last 20 minutes. I attribute most of this to the budget. For a few dollars more, and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly would be vast, sprawling adventures, but with A Fistful of Dollars, one setting, we're treated to scenes of Clint Eastwood sneaking around and punching a lady in the face. Oops. Of course, we have to remember that audiences at the time didn't have the context of what Leone's westerns would evolve into, and as a contained standalone story, A Fistful of Dollars was a huge hit. I've revisited this film plenty of times, and it's always a treat. And like I said earlier, as a huge fan of westerns and Sergio Leone, the novelty of this genre-defining film isn't lost on me. If you're at all interested in film history, or even just looking for some fun, pulpy escapism, give A Fistful of Dollars a watch. Like last time, let's end this review with some fun facts I came across in my research for this video. You might be wondering why Eastwood's first leading role was a spaghetti western and not a Hollywood production. Well, with his recurring role on Rawhide, he was contractually obligated to not take any other work, even during breaks from shooting the show, as they may impede the filming schedule. However, this only legally applied to American productions, so naturally, he found work in Europe. Speaking of Eastwood, it's said that his signature squint initially wasn't an intentional acting choice, but a byproduct of the blistering Spanish sun and the high-voltage arc lamps used on set. That tree with the noose at the beginning of the film had to actually be brought to the shooting location. Leone had a specific look in mind that he wanted, and saw the tree he was looking for on a local farm along the highway. Posing as a highway official in charge of removing dangerous trees, he had the tree confiscated. Originally, the film was titled The Magnificent Stranger, and this carried throughout the production. It wasn't until 3 days before release that the title was changed to A Fistful of Dollars. Because of this, Eastwood was completely unaware of the positive buzz surrounding the film until his agent pointed it out to him in a Variety article weeks later. As I said, A Fistful of Dollars is a Western remake of the 1961 samurai film Yojimbo, directed by Akira Kurosawa. Leone never reached out to Kurosawa for permission legally or professionally, and after seeing the film, Kurosawa wrote to Leone saying, "I like your film very much. It's a very interesting film. Unfortunately, it's my film, not your film." Kurosawa took the matter to court, to which he'd received 15% of the film's total gross and exclusive distribution rights in Japan. Kurosawa would go on to make more money from A Fistful of Dollars than any of his own releases, which is insane to me considering his legendary filmography. Finally, the stylized opening title credits were inspired by Maurice Bender's iconic work on the opening title sequences in the James Bond films of the era. On that note, this has been Wild West Film School. I hope you enjoyed the video, and let me know in the comments down below what Western I should cover next.